We are just starting up with our artist in town, Kat Burns. She's going to be making a beautiful piece, or two pieces of glass for us tonight in our amphitheater hot shop. And welcome to everybody that's joining us online as well. I'm going to introduce the whole team, but Kat Burns is right here in the center, and she's just in the midst of kind of looking over a pattern of Murrini that we're going to be working with. Chris Giordano is her main assistant. Kat Burns and Chris have been here with us in the amphitheater since Monday morning, producing a lot of work, making some really beautiful things. I'll talk a bit about that. We have G. Brian Juck here. He's going to be helping out. Bronan Dempsey's going to help. My name is Chris. I'll be jumping in and helping out as well, making some introductions. And Amanda Kranz is our online moderator. So early on in the week, Kat has produced lots of cane, which are rods of colored glass. She's chopped a lot of those rods up and produced little Murrini, and that's what we have on this big ceramic plate. But up on our stage, we have lots of furnaces. We have our reheating oven. That's what you're going to see Chris using quite a bit of for these moves. This is an empty oven, and this is one of the neatest things about our program is the view that you can get from the backside of that furnace. Now, that furnace is holding right now around 2,100 Fahrenheit. In the back of it, there's a little port with a window of fused silica. That's a very special type of glass, and it's one of the most common questions we get is, how is the camera in that oven? It appears like it because it's such a close-up shot, but it's right next to that window, and that window has an extremely high melting temperature, that fused silica. But they're softening this Murrini pattern, and one thing when you're working with Murrini, especially a pattern this large, is that it takes lots of reheats. You don't want to overheat anything. When you go into that reheating chamber, you all that are seated here, when you look straight on at it, if you think of it as the face of a clock, there are burners, two of them, that are positioned at 10 o'clock, and they're firing downward, so basically on the left side. If he goes in there with that plate and just stays there and gets it really, really hot, the left side of the plate gets really hot, and it starts to soften, and those little Murrini can kind of puddle out, and you lose the definition in them. Looks like they're getting ready to flip the plate. These are Kevlar mittens. Kevlar is a really good material for a glass studio. You can hold on to something very hot with those. And that plate is well over 1,000 degrees now. Lining it up. These are white Murrini. You can start to see now with heat building into them, that orange tint is starting to show up. Good indicator that they are softening. So here is Kat using those paddles to squeeze both sides of that rectangular pattern. She actually did tack fuse these last night. So she laid out this pattern yesterday, and she put them into a kiln and heated them up to about 1,300 degrees. Now, on this plate, we have put kiln wash. Kiln wash is a really important part of this whole process, because if you just had a ceramic shelf, a ceramic plate, and you started to heat it up and you were heating the glass like we're doing now with no kiln wash, the Murrini would stick to the ceramic and you would not get it off. You'd have to break it off once it was cold. That kiln wash is just a resist that's on there that helps that to not stick to it. Here's that torch work that I was mentioning, and that's a propane torch. That flame isn't really hot enough to soften the glass per se. It would a little bit, but really what she's doing now is kind of preheating areas. When Chris brings the plate back into the reheating chamber now, that area she torched just has a little extra temperature to it. And again, that flipping around. So just working with the one side of that oven getting hotter and hotter, or heating the plate hotter and hotter, flipping it back and forth is very important. I'll jump in here and close the doors down too if you want. We close these doors up a bit when he's in there, and that just helps to bounce the heat back inside the oven and away from Chris as well. Oh, Kat has asked for these were David Patchen, who is a wonderful artist that works with a lot of Murrini, brought these, I think it was 3 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago, I can't remember. But he was here working with our team in the amphitheater, and he brought these with him. These are really nice for big size pieces like this. Not only do they have the length I call them samurai swords, not only do they have the length to really accommodate larger patterns, but they also have that wooden guard. So when you're doing that and you're squeezing, your hands are shielded from the heat. Now you could put gloves on too, but it's way cooler to use these samurai sword looking objects. But thank you, David. They are getting some use. Kat made a couple pieces earlier today, same type of form that she'll be creating for us with this piece. They're basically spherical shapes, And when you put the Murrini on the surface of a piece like this, you can get it really hot and soften and smooth the whole thing out. But if you don't encase it with clear glass and you inflate it, it will still kind of leave some texture behind from the Murrini. Glass has a memory like that. And that's actually what Kat is after for this series of pieces. She wants them to be tactile, really work with that texture. Kat has a very special pair of calipers on the table here called pie dividers. So these are designed to give you the measurement of the length of a pattern. And if you're going to roll it up on a bubble like we're about to do, the other side gives you the diameter. So it gives you the circumference and the diameter so you can match the size, the dimensions of the bubble to the length of your pattern so you can seamlessly roll it up. Now she's starting to work that smaller pattern, the cap, as we'll call it for the cylinder, the end of the cylinder. Getting some measurements down with that. But she is starting the bubble for the main body of this vessel. That pattern will get wrapped onto. He's got a couple gathers of our clear glass, and it does look orange when it comes out because it's glowing. That's the infrared heat that we're seeing. But he's taking a seat at the other bench. He's going to shape, he's going to center this using a tool called a block. This is a fruit wood scoop that's been soaked in water. Is there any difference with the control we have, blowing glass the normal way with our mouth or using a compressed air system? Absolutely. This system was really well designed. You can see on the back of the bench here, there's our air pressure regulator. We can dial that up or down to pounds of pressure, and then there's a needle valve right here, which gives it tiny, tiny adjustments. So this system, you can dial it up or down with a lot of control, but the big difference between this system and blowing with our mouth, it's kind of hard to adjust that on the fly. It has been very efficient for certain things, and our team has grown to like it for certain things, but I think we're all looking forward to when it's just an option and not a requirement. So G's got a third gather on top of that bubble that he made. He did make a little starter bubble inside that. When you watch a glass blower turning so smoothly, that is muscle memory. It does take a while to really develop that. Does anybody here have any questions about anything? About Kat's week with us? Yeah. So he's asked, when we use the propane torch and they're torching the white glass, why does it turn all black? Why does it look sooty? That is reducing the color. So that's raw white colored glass that's on there, and that propane torch creates a reduction on it. So it reduces it and makes it kind of look dirty. If we made this piece and we're all done with it and we're about to put it into a kiln that slowly cools it, and she uses that torch, that reduction could stay there. So I don't think that she'll probably use that towards the end, but that's just reduction. So early on in the week, we were kind of in heavy production mode down here, working on lots of different things in Kat's product line, and this is one of the notorious Unity pumpkins. So the color in the stem, I think this is a blue. Is this like a silver blue that you guys add to this? Iris violet. So when you hear iris tagged on to a color, I'll talk a bit more about the colors in a moment, but that refers to a reduction color. So you can see they used that same propane torch at the end when this stem was already shaped, blasted it with the propane, and instead of the violet color, you get this really cool kind of metallic sheen to it, and that's reduction. Much of what we work here at the museum comes from a German company called Reichenbach. They've been in the business for over a couple hundred years now, so they have 2 centuries of know-how when it comes to creating those colors. When you mix the raw ingredients together to make glass, can anybody tell me the main ingredient to glass? Just shout it out if you know it. So Kat's taken, I think, the final gather for this. She says, yes, that is the final gather. We have to build glass in separate layers. Again, we call those gathers because of the viscosity when it's held at 2,100 degrees. It's a lot like honey. What brings Kat to the museum this week? Well, Kat is actually local. She lives here in Corning. She's been blowing glass in Corning for quite some time. This particular week is a very special week, though. It's a partnership with our shops. So the marketplace here, located bottom floor of our museum, this is a partnership where Kat has been allowed to come into the amphitheater and work with our team, work with our studio, and create some of her product line. So some of that has been producing things that are going literally directly into the market after they come out of the oven, once she signs them. Another part is a little bit of experimentation. So she's been kind of prototyping and playing around with some ideas that she's had. You'll see her use this Marvering table. That's just a big steel table. Checking those caliper measurements yet again. Getting the cylindrical shape so it matches up the pattern. So Kat just said, this is the one. She's ready. Gio takes another heat on the plate. Maybe we'll get a good overhead shot of this. You can see how Gio kind of tests the corners of the pattern with the tag. Kind of lifts it up. You can see how the glass is bending and moving. Looks like it's got a really good heat. She tags it down and just gently rolls. She's inflating the bubble a little bit more right now before she goes all the way. She doesn't want it to overlap, so she's expanding the bubble. That gives her a little bit more diameter to work with on the gather. And just gently back and forth until she has the pattern completed on both sides. Nice job. I think that deserves a big round of applause. That was very well executed and nicely coordinated amongst the team. So this is kind of like buttoning up a shirt. You want to make sure that everything is aligned up, and she's just doing that with some tweezers. That was beautiful, Kat. Nicely done. Sure, of course. You're on. You got it. Do you need a brush or anything? There's a brush right here. So if there is any residual kiln wash on the pattern that she's just rolled up, we can brush that off now. Looks like it's pretty clean, but you never know. I'll go through the motions now. I like doing this part. I'm a bit of a clean freak.
We're going to sandblast it anyway.
Oh, okay. Kat said she's going to sandblast this after the fact, so it'll give it kind of an etched texture. But it's always good to just give it a little brush off. Michael has the dimensions set for her, so she knows what to shoot for here. This is a really good use of that Marvering table, just a big steel slab. Timing is of the essence when you're working glass. Temperature and timing. So here we go. Michael's got the pipe. Looks like Kat will kind of guide him on to the tip. Again, this is one of those one-shot deals. Plunging it down. Looks like a pretty good shot. Let's give him another round of applause. Nicely done. Nicely done. That's where you don't want to flinch. Very cool. A little more brush action. So this particular form, right now we're still in the relatively early stages of a vessel, and she could literally turn this into any shape vessel she wanted to. The pieces she made earlier were spherical shapes, and I think that's what she's going for with this one as well. So once we get everything kind of situated and melted together nicely, we can start to work some good heat into the whole thing, start to inflate it larger and larger. And she's got a decent amount of clear glass on the inside, so she can stretch that quite a ways. Now, when you start to inflate and stretch this, those Murrini will also stretch. So all those little kind of polka dots from those individual rods that went in to make the Murrini will also stretch with this. But remember, she said she's after that tactile feeling, so she wants to retain that texture. Basically, so if somebody were to check this piece out and they were visually impaired, they can actually kind of feel the texture with their hands and experience it in a different manner, which I think is really cool. All about the experience. As she heats, too, another question we get quite a bit is how do you know when to heat? How do you know how long to stay in those ovens to get the glass just the right temperature? Most of it comes down to experience. You know, Kat's been blowing glass for, you said 11 years now, Kat? Yep, 11 years, so that's a lot of experience. We can also feel the glass softening as we're in those ovens. So the longer you stay in there, the more gravity's pull kind of feels on it. If you were to stop turning, the glass would slump. Now, the hotter it is, the faster it slumps. But you can really feel in the torque that you have to apply with your hands and your fingers when the glass is getting hotter and hotter. Furthermore, you can feel when it's getting colder, too, or stiffer. It becomes easier to turn those blowpipes. So we really do rely on all that dexterity. By heating and rolling on this table, this is called a marver, so we call this marvering. When she's doing this, it's really kind of taking that outside edge and kind of squeezing it a little bit more but it's also working some of that heat back into that pretty massive gather that's on the inside of the pattern. Even this move, this Marvering, it looks like, oh, she just kind of sets it down and then pushes the pipe. That is not true. This is in itself is pretty hard to do, because if you just set that piece down for the briefest of moments without turning very smoothly and supporting the weight, you create a flat spot on that glass. If you create a flat spot, it's extremely hard to get rid of that flat spot. So when you're Marvering, it's kind of like a smooth landing, but you're also kind of lifting up. You're supporting the weight of that gather. You're simply using the metal surface as a tool to kind of shape against. You're not just laying the glass on there. The first bubble that G made, everybody who was here saw G make a couple gathers, and then he made a nice little core bubble. A lot of glass blowers call that a starter bubble or a core bubble. It can also be called a parison. That's just kind of a foundation to build on. But a gather of glass on top of that is simply just called a gather. So when we get it out of the furnace, it's called a gather. There's many different types of furnaces. What we have is a crucible sitting inside of ours. Some ovens are a day tank, so they're kind of like a brick square or rectangle shape. But this is a ceramic pot. This one can hold 1,000 pounds of glass if we fill it. It's pretty full today. Michael and I threw a couple 100 pounds of glass inside of it last night. And what we shovel in there is called cullet. So cooling the pipe after all that reheating and shaping, cooling the pipe down, that just gives us a little bit more control, a little more comfort. But I want to bring the attention back to what the team's doing. This is where things get really involved and really exciting with multiple people jumping in there. Kat is still the gaffer, seated at the bench, using a newspaper pad to kind of stop the bubble from blowing out as she hits the foot pedal. Chris is really doing a lot of the turning here, a lot of the torque. G is also providing some shielding, using those wooden boards just to get in there in between Kat's arm and that object, because it's radiating a lot of temperature, a lot of heat. But we'll squeeze a jack line or a constriction line into the form to make sure we have a break-off point, a removal point. This is critical to the process. I'm going to jump in here and blow some. Oh, I was going to get the smoke out of her face, but I'm going to shield her hand right now too. Using this propane torch to preheat certain areas before another reheat. If she sees the bubble isn't blowing out in one area, and we call that the backside of the bubble right now, she's using that torch to heat that area, allowing the front half of the bubble to kind of cool a bit. So this is giving a little bit more heat and softness in that area. So when they go to kind of work the jack line down more or blow it up more, that area is going to move around as well. Temperature control. Last big heat, she said. So do you have room in the annealer right now? Is it the... Let's double check. We've used a lot of ovens. We used 2 ovens today. Oh, there's room. There's room on the left side. We'll be fine. That's one thing with the newer paper pads is they are pretty smoky until they get burned in. I'll just blow some of the smoke away from the team here. That's a great shot right there. Lots of smoke, lots of ash. Yeah, to make a nice round sphere like that really does require having good even heat throughout the whole thing. The tighter that constriction line is, when we go to break something free, the easier it will be to break free without damaging the form. So we're going to crack the glass, so you don't want the crack to travel. So we really kind of carve that constriction in nicely. What do you all think of this piece? Fantastic, right? Absolutely beautiful. So I think they got the form where they want it. Now it's time to kind of let certain areas cool so they stiffen up and stay in place, but take a series of quick reheats called flash heats. Brona, you want to run this side? And then we'll get this piece off the pipe and into the annealing oven. To anneal a piece like this, even though it's rather large, 12 hours is probably fine. We'll ask Kat what she wants, but 12 hours should be plenty. The time frame to slowly cool something, the annealing cycle, is really dependent on how thick a piece of glass is, not how large. Get it off the pipe and into the annealing oven. Are you going to fire polish this one too? You going to fire polish this break off too? Yeah, okay, great. Yep. And a flash is just that very brief reheat, just a maintenance heat. Make sure the temperatures are where they need to be. Learning those temperatures, that's something that also comes with experience. Obviously, we're not looking at it with our eyes and telling you exactly how hot it is. But the annealing does start at 900 degrees for this type of glass. So that's where our annealers are set. And they are programmed, when we start the program, to slowly cool down over whatever time we need it to. And this, again, probably 12 hours. So it is moving slightly, but it's moving on that constriction, which is a pretty good thing. When it's moving like that, we know that it's in a good temperature range. And you can shock that line that is still moving with a little water on a diamond file. You can score the glass. She might apply a little more water to it. And what water does at this stage is creates little stress fractures. We're really careful when we do this move not to let water touch the actual piece. One little drop could definitely ruin it. But you see how G is cradling right below it. Just in case it pops off, he's got his gloves there, ready in case. And I've seen pieces drop at this point before, so it's always a really nice thing to do. Yep, I gotcha. Breaks free. Quick little zap with our torch. I love that shot, the flame going into the sphere. You can see how it just lights the globe right up. Safe and sound. G will get it into the annealer. We'll make sure it gets loaded well. Nice load, G. Let's give it up for the team. That's Kat Burns. Beautiful job. Chris Giordano. Got Bronan Dempsey, G. Brian Juck. Lots of work. And Amanda Kranz.